Welcome to the Thrive in the Workplace podcast, brought to you by The Wellness Theory in partnership with B1G1 Business for Good. This podcast is all about uplifting organisations to thrive when it comes to all things workplace well-being. From organisational culture, the most effective wellness campaigns you can imagine, and integrating social good. You will find insights, inspiration and information that supports leaders at all levels to implement best practices to improve engagement, performance and vitality within the workforce. We believe that workplaces can and should be healthy and sustainable for both the workforce, the bottom line and the community. And in this podcast, we'll show you how. And just so you know, for every listen this podcast gets, we'll be donating to a life-saving project aligned with the UN 2030 global goals. So thank you for being here and continuing the ripple effect. Without further ado, join us to thrive in the workplace and become a force for good in the world. Welcome to the show, Szilvia. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Szilvia, you are one of the most straight-talking thought leaders in the corporate space, particularly within this region. And I believe actually that you have one of the best LinkedIn newsletters that I've ever seen, because you're always just saying how it is. And you often expose like really harsh truths about organizational behavior and just generally the workplace. And really, you really tap into what needs to change to improve workplaces to suit like the modern world. And I absolutely love what you do and what you stand for. So I'm really excited to kick off this conversation with you to understand some of like the highlights from your personal and professional journey that have led you to where you are today for some of our listeners that might not yet know you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yes, I like to state the truth because then we can move forward with the solution, right? That's the only reason. So I spent 19 years in the hotel industry and I have done operation and I ended up in corporate, and this is I have 8 years of experience in learning and development and talent management, and from senior employee or line employees all the way to senior leaders, leadership development. I was particularly happy to open 11 hotels. So I'm very practical, very pragmatic. I like to, get down to the business, let's solve the problem, and then we move on because there are millions of problems they are waiting to be solved. So that's why it's always the honesty, because then you move forward very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I part of me really wishes that more people were like this. I think, there's a time and place for setting the right pace and rhythm for certain changes that need to happen. But when it comes to seeing what needs to change, we have to have our finger on the pulse. I think you do such a great job of that. So, Szilvia, this podcast, as you know, is obviously dedicated to empowering forward-thinking leaders across the GCC to build sustainable workforces. And you specialise in organizational psychology. So I would love to hear from your eyes, what is it? What is organizational psychology and behavior, and how does this actually influence the organizations? Because it's like one of those nice labels, but tell us practically, what is that all about?
So yes, not many people understand, even we don't understand sometimes what we're supposed to do. So it's basically studying human behavior and applying it to organizations. So what does it really mean is understanding why people behave and act in certain ways. What influences those behaviors? So let's say engagement. It's not, engagement is not what is about what these corporate gurus are telling you. They haven't studied. It's really around what is the Gen Z behind Gen Z's behavior. And so psychologists they study, and we take those studies, we study those studies, and based on that, we try to create solutions and provide solutions and reorganize and redesign organizations in the form of leadership development, policies, procedures, and practices. So it goes from talent attraction all the way to exit. Organizational psychologists are on every aspect of the employee life cycle, because how do we attract employees? What attracts the young generation? So we cannot rely on HR. We need, the HR is doing the guessing work. They are very, very busy with running daily operations. They don't understand human behavior. And this is what is missing from organizations. understanding human behavior rather than just labeling people or just saying, you know what, nobody wants to work, nobody is engaged, and the reason they are not engaged because the food is not great in the canteen. We take this out, and that's why I get very triggered sometimes, with these kind of things, because that's not the truth. Now, I'm not saying that organizational psychologists have the answer to everything, because human beings are super, super complex, and we always, without a fail, we provide you with the solution, but we always say, look, we don't know how human beings will react to that, because there are so many things that we can't even account for or predict. And that's the beauty of it. We implement a solution based on behavior and psychology and everything that we know, but we always expect the unexpected that we have never thought about, and we are ready with our studies and background to address that or adjust. And that's the most exciting. We never come with, this is the definite solution like HR tends to do, or business leaders, this is what you're supposed to do. We would never make that claim.
It's so necessary to add that human element into the mix, because it's easy to look on paper, isn't it, and say, okay, these are the company goals, this is where we need to be, but the humans are the number one variable on that, whether they're a consumer or whether they're an employee. So if we're almost ignoring it to some extent, and I think generally speaking that we do tend to ignore the impact that human behavior has, that in detail and absolute depth. And one of the things that really drew me to your work was when I heard you speaking about the generations that are in the workplace, and you're really, really passionate about designing modern workplaces. One, tell us, why are you so passionate about that? And two, what does that mean? What does that really look like?
That's a good question, right? I'm very passionate because I've been there for 19 years, almost 20 years. And I have experienced it, that the old school mindset, everything has changed in the past. I mean, everything changes all the time, right? But everything changed in the past 10 to 15 years rapidly, probably more so than before. Before that, the change real in terms of the workplace policies and procedures and structures. Now everything is being questioned because the mindset, the technology, the fast-paced environment, and the needs of human beings. So once again, I'm coming back to the needs of human beings, and it's not being taken into consideration. Instead, those needs are being constantly rejected by organizations and business leaders. The property development guy just came out yesterday. I mean, I read their article yesterday that Gen Z and younger generation and workers in general, they are arrogant, they don't want to work. So we need to create unemployment rate in order to increase productivity. Now that would work, that boiled my blood when I was reading. I'm like, probably not. So the complete rejection of any kind of needs and change. What we want to do is applying these processes that were built for factory workers over 100 years ago. We haven't changed them. It's everything exactly the same, and to today's generations. It just doesn't work. And we need to create modern workplaces by implementing human needs and the behavior and the context, right? Everything changes because the reason people don't want to work is because of the environment that they find when they are coming into the workplace. And we cannot fight it with pizza, with promises, with not even bonuses anymore. I know people that they say, I don't want to climb the ladder. I don't want a bonus. I want a 4-day working week, or I want that you don't give me so much stress. And people are not talking about the workload, but psychological stress created by maybe sometimes toxic working environment, that I take it home to my family and I poison everybody else around me. And designing modern workplaces is literally catering for the people who are in the workforce. Is, and I have a hospitality background, and it's like, and even we don't understand this in the hospitality, which we should. If the guest wants this, we have to provide that. Otherwise, they are not staying with you. It's that simple. So if employees want that, we're going to have to work around that. Now, I'm not saying we change everything, and sometimes there are things that we can't give. But if we don't, or at least we don't try, and they don't see that we're trying, they're not going to stay with us. It's as simple as that, you know?
Yeah. It fascinates me. It really does. Because one of the things that I'm seeing, so obviously I'm a business owner and a senior leader within my organization. And obviously a part of that is being in the entrepreneurial space as well. And we're seeing so many more young entrepreneurs coming through because they don't want to work for other people and never got the confidence that they can create a better environment, right? So that need for these bigger corporations or the older school mentality led organizations are not, really ticking the box for them, right? It's not attractive to them whatsoever. And the way it's become so easy to be an entrepreneur now, and I'm not saying everybody should be, but because it's got so easy, there's more options, right? So therefore, organizations need to up their game and be able to open the door and welcome the younger generations in with open arms. So on that note, Szilvia, what are the most common needs that you're seeing from the younger generations coming through that are not being met within the older school mentality organizations?
So it's basically working based on required, the clarity around my contribution. What do you want from me? As opposed to how many hours you want me to spend in here. So that's a massive change, It's major, and we don't know that in organization. I spent eight years in corporate office, and there were days I'm like, why am I sitting in this office? And this is my job, and I'm very good at keeping myself busy or finding a purpose, because I need to have that. But there were days that I didn't know. I didn't know what I was supposed to do during that 10 hours from 9 to 6 or whatever. And that's an issue now. It's an issue because this is when the young generations, they are very transactional, they are very purposeful, they are very intentional. Tell me what do you want me to do, and I will do it. So we don't have clarity around performance. We don't know what performance looks like. And that creates the problem nobody wants to address around coming back to the workforce or workplace, to the offices to work, right? Bosses don't want us or people to go back to the offices. I mean, it's very complex because it has so many elements as well, property and all that, but they don't want us at the workforce to come back because, they don't trust. And I really don't believe that. But why they don't trust them, because they themselves don't know what the expectations. So if you don't know what you expect from me, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do during my working hours, whether it is in the office, at home, or in the ship, then you're going to say that, I didn't give her things to do. She doesn't know, I don't know. So she's going to lie on the sofa. And that is true, because there is no direction. So that causes the problem with coming back to the office, because there is no clear expectations. Because if you told me you need to send out 100 emails, and when it's done, you wouldn't care where I get it done from, right? So that is clarity around it. There's obviously a lot of flexibility. People don't want, and people want to work on their own terms, in a sense of, I will do it. But don't tell me when and how. Even the trainings started to change, and nobody is paying attention to that. So I'm an L&D professional. I studied how people learn, and the video games showed us a really good study that young generations, when they come across with the new video game, they go all the way to the end, and then they come back and start doing the game or playing the game. So what does it mean in learning and development, or even in, when you are training people? Show them the end product. Don't drag them along. You lose their interest. And then you label them, these people don't have span of, attention. They do. But first they want to see what you want from them. And then they decide how they are going to go about, achieving it. There's infinite way of doing anything, or get to, that outcome. So they kind of rejected that too. There's a lot of flexibility that they require, but the most of them is really around, am I recognized, but not in a way that we used to know in terms of compensation and benefit and money and all that, but am I recognized who I am and what do I bring to the table as a human being, So it's individual approach, it's self-expression. See me who I am. Don't see me amongst or along the competency framework, and don't try to build me into any kind of framework. We face that issue very, very quickly when we start. So learning and leadership development is changing massively to self-awareness based, because people said, I don't want to fit into any kind of framework. I am who I am. And you need to see that and leverage that. And this is where engagement really is the core of engagement.
Yeah, there's so many ways I can go with that answer, honestly. Because it's everything you've said there is spot on. I think it's a tricky road for leaders to be walking down right now, particularly if they are not in those younger generational years. So what would you say to someone who's listening to this? Perhaps they're C-suite leader, HR, L&D leaders listening to this who are thinking that all sounds great and it sounds like a lot of work. It sounds hard and I don't have time to do it. What do you say to them?
Of course. Well, if you don't have time for your people, then go and do something else. That's the job. That's all I can say. And at the same time, I also understand senior leaders are super, super busy. I understand their workforce. I used to be developing them, VPs and all that. So I understand. However, it's not as difficult as we might think, because personalized approach is really in the small daily actions. Engagement is in the small daily actions. Everything is in the small daily actions, not in once a year big plans and what we're going to do. Personal approach is really, am I paying attention to my people? I'm not asking senior leaders to sit down with everybody half an hour a week. Nobody has the time for that, right? And I completely support. But have I asked and 3 questions that they really should be asking themselves, any leader really who is managing people or leading people, what my team members' strengths are, each of them, what they are really good at, what do they bring to the table? And here I'm not talking about Excel skill. I'm not talking about, she's really good at, churning out emails or whatever it is. What is she bringing to the table? Is it she can build relationships really well? She executes tasks. She's on time. She drives the team. She influences others, or she's really good in communication and building relationships, right? So 4 domains that we really categorize people in, and within that we break it down. And the second one, what do they do every single day? And I had a workshop the other week. And when I asked the leaders, I'm like, what do your team members do every single day that is repeated? Like each of them, they had no idea. Mm-hmm. So paying attention that Szilvia is always there to make sure, when there is a conflict is evolving, Szilvia steps in. So she doesn't like conflict, she likes harmony, let's say, right? It's just an example. What do they do every single day? And when you as a leader or manager, you cannot say, and I'm not talking about tasks, you cannot say that at least 5 of each of your people, you haven't paid attention, right? And then the last one, how do they feel? Are they frustrated? Are they engaged? Are they positive? What is the level of energy? Are they concerned about? If we don't know the answer to these 3 questions, it's real, and there's nothing to do with any organizational process, right? Because oftentimes I meet large organizations and leaders, my talent development system or this kind of, it has nothing to do. You can still run your systems as useless or useful as they are. I'm talking about you. Do you know the answer to these 3 questions about each of your employees? Because if you don't, you're not paying attention, and I'm not saying you don't care about them, but you are more occupied by the daily tasks that you need to do, sending your emails, than paying attention to the people who are actually working or getting the job done on your team.
Yeah, and then when obviously they're paying attention, you're going to get more out of those people when they're doing their tasks, right? And it's so interesting that you said that. So one of the companies that I've worked for before, they were a big fan of Clifton Strengths, as I am. And I think it was actually a really great thing for me to do, especially as I was moving into more leadership roles as well. And it was great. But the thing that I found is that it was well-intentioned, but not perhaps as well executed as what it could have been. So there was only a certain number of people at a certain level that were able to do the identifying the strengths first of all. And I think that is also a little bit of an Achilles heel, because we need to be able to understand that from every employee. Otherwise, we're sending a message as to essentially, we care about you more than we care about these people, right? So that was a bit of a red flag. But also, one thing that I saw is you had to put your top 5 strengths on your email signature. And I thought, okay, that makes sense, right? Because then you're mindful of how you're communicating and what you're asking from others and so forth. But then it almost got ignored. It was almost like becoming poster blind, right? It was like, okay, there's a nice tick box. We've done that, which is great. And one of my top 5 strengths was responsibility, which was great on the most part. However, that led very quickly towards my burnout, because it was left completely unchecked through lack of my own self-awareness of that particular strength that was turned into essentially a bit of a weakness. And nobody noticed it, given the fact that I was surrounded by, say, at least 50 other people that have done the same training, that are essentially supposed to be as attuned to strengths as they could be. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. Responsibility is my number 4. So I feel you. And I have number 5, discipline. So these two drive me absolutely, to exhaustion. And you need to check, And so Clifton Strength is really good, or any kind of, intervention is good, but it's as good as how it's implemented, right? So yes, I do run workshops, but I always say that that's just the very first step, right? It's literally 1% of what organizations who take that seriously do. Because when I come across with organizations who really want to work with Clifton Strengths, and we did a project beginning of last year for 6 months, and it was a hectic one the first time I did it, and I'm like, oh my god, this is exhausting. So the company, it was 147 employees, and they wanted to, now they are growing, it's getting bigger. Okay, what do we do? This is the time to start implementing these people management processes. And I worked with them implementing Clifton Strengths from EVP, from attracting talent, onboarding, managing performance, leadership development. We built it into their annual appraisal, and obviously all the way to exit. And the exit part, which I'm like, what do I do with this exit? And this is my creativity, the discipline, and then responsibility sometimes comes in. And I was up all night. I'm like, I need to figure something out. I'm like, what do we do? There must be something. And I reached out to a few of the coaches, and everybody, I don't know. I haven't done that part. I facilitate. I'm like, okay. So what we built in, when an employee is leaving, they obviously have gone through all the strengths. So they are very familiar with their own strengths and how to use it and tap into it, and et cetera, et cetera. And with the exit plan, they had a questionnaire that actually prepared them going into the next role based on their strength.
Nice.
Or if they didn't have the job, what is it that they would like to do or look for based on their strengths? What are the next jobs that they are aspired to, and how do they link to their strengths? So what the company did here is really showing my dedication for your fantastic exit experience. So you get to go into the big wide world and talk about us, how good we are as an employer.
Nice.
So
it's a really complete solution when you implement it that way. Now, listen, I think that the company that I was referring to earlier that I was working with, they were absolutely directionally correct. And there was definitely a lot that came out of that. It just could have been done to a whole nother level and got so much more out of it. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing generally, right, in corporate at the moment, is there's a lot of this, let's just put like a band-aid over this situation and see if it helps, than anything else.
Look, Charlotte, I don't even blame them. It's difficult and you need a dedicated person. You know, I always say that we can have the best plan if there is no execution. We can have the best workshop, we can have the best strategy. And I have seen, or not even incorporate, even at property level, you know, in the past 15 years, I have seen hundreds of strategies coming out every 3 months, every 6 months. And 6 months later, we have a strategy that goes against the previous strategy because now, you know, and the reason is not because that strategy was bad, but nobody's implemented it. So now we need to recreate the wheel. So I always say to companies, do your workshops, you know, that's fine. It's always going to do something, you know, at least raise staff awareness. But if you don't implement whatever you spend for, it is literally just give me the money and I go, you know, because that's a waste of money. There is no point of doing it. And I'd rather have one thing be done per year, but that's done, than starting 10 different things and none of them is completed. Because this is where people become cynical to change human behavior. We taught them very well, right? We have put them through so many changes and none of them had a real clear outcome. Because if you put me through change, which is painful, which I don't want to, which makes me uncomfortable, now I need to move my desk to another office. Why are you doing this to me? But if there is a clear positive outcome, I would say, you know what, it worked it. It's like child labor, you know, you go through it, but then there's joy and happiness out of it. You're gonna go through again, okay. You know, we went through, it was painful, but at the end, it worth it. But we taught people that change is not good because there is no positive outcome. So I always argue with the notion of people don't like change. That's not true. People don't like change that has no any outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And then no accountability with it and no actual track to know how you're progressing. It's interesting, right? Because if you look like a marketing department within a company, they stick to one campaign for a certain amount of time. It's very clear. The communication pipeline is already done. It's like, and 9 times out of 10, if it is working, they will continue on that path and that will feed in to the next campaign and so on. So you seem to get this right in some departments, but when it comes to perhaps workplace well-being, you know, it can be a bit of a blurred line. Like, can you share any tips that perhaps leaders that are listening to this could perhaps just start to think about to nudge themselves on the right track when it comes to having that clear pathway?
So I think in terms of employee engagement, well-being, or experience, I would like them, first of all, is to have clarity around. The three goes hand in hand, is one thing, you know, it's just the same side or different side of the same item. And that's the first confusion that I always come across. They fragmented it and they don't know how to put it together. So we need to bring it together for them that, look, the employee engagement score is just the sum total of everything related to well-being and experience, you know? Like, forget about your score because they are so hooked up on that score and everything related to that, which is the old school way of measuring it, that they forget how do we get there, you know? And the second part related to engagement, well-being, or experience, we don't know what it is. I asked my company once, my CHRO, I'm like, what is our well-being? Because we started 5-6 years ago, I don't know, a well-being campaign. I'm like, and I like to understand. My number one strength is interaction, and number 2 is input and learner. So these three, if I don't understand something, I will not go to sleep until I understand. And I'm like, what is it? And there was no answer. I'm like, how do we do things or action something, prepare a plan for it when we don't understand? Yeah. And then I ask her, and that's the CHR I'm talking about. I'm like, what is engagement? I'm like, define, what is it that I'm working towards? Because I need to know what it is. I want my people happy. So if you don't define it, with the well-being, you are the well-being expert. I'm not so much, but I know that, even if you don't know, take a framework. This is when you default back to a framework. Those frameworks sometimes are really good to guide you to start the process. Take those 5 elements or 4 elements and work around that. Physical well-being, mental well-being. What does it mean in terms of employee experience and engagement, right? But if you don't know what it means, employee well-being, you don't know where you are working towards. And this is where they get lost. They go into different directions that they don't even correspond to what they want to do. When I always tie that to leaders, when you need to write academic papers, which we do constantly, they always tell you, can you please go back to your title every 10 minutes? So then you know what you need to write about, because while you are doing all that writing, sometimes you write 25,000 words, your mind goes into many different directions, and then you go off path so badly that has nothing to do with the title of your paper. And that's a fail. Your academics, your professor immediately with the red pen, nothing to do with the title, bye. And this is the exact thing that we are doing with well-being and all that kind of engagement agendas. We don't know what is the title.
So would you say that the clear tip and the starting point for anyone listening to this is simply define it and define what it means to them as an organization? Because you can go and find 1,000,001 different, definitions, but what does it mean to them as a company? So that's Absolutely. Like the starting point. And then from there, working backwards to what it is obviously they want to achieve.
So for example, well-being, if you just take the dictionary definition, right, it's physical and mental well-being, being functioning well and feeling comfortable. That's psychology kind of understanding or definition. So what does it mean my employees are functioning well? And now we can use that framework within this area. It means that, what does it mean my employees are functioning well when it comes to leadership or mental well-being? Okay, so toxic work environment. I never heard any company talking about that, when we know that this is one of the biggest reasons people are suffering mental health issues, physical health issues, and all the problems and retention and all that kind of things. So how do we implement that? Physical ones, most of the time we have, and I had that, and you can go with that into so many different directions. I had this conversation with my HR person. I'm like, why are we so hooked on if the employees are liking the food in the staff canteen, right? I'm like, shouldn't it be that, okay, you need to like it, of course, food is to be liked, but also healthy. But we are not feeding them healthy food. And how does it respond and relate to our insurance costs? How many times these guys are going, that would be the measurement, right, of your engagement and well-being and adding all it together. How many times these guys are going to the doctor? Why are they going to the doctor? I'm just working together. I can't say too much because I signed an NDA and I can't. But I'm working together with a company who wants to take employee engagement, look at it very differently. So I came up with an idea. I'm like, okay, so why don't we look at employee engagement on a daily basis, but not through, any kind of system. So the company already has an application, okay? And the application sends a notification every day. Are you happy to come to, were you happy to come to work today? That's it, yes or no, right? But that's not sufficient information for us, because you might not like to come to work today. You were not happy because your dog just died. So it has nothing to do with the company, so it's not. And then it gives you few words, so you don't need to write. It's just very generic ones, I had an argument with my colleague. I had an argument with my boss, private matter. So then you collect information throughout the year of the employee. And instead of measuring that employee engagement if we really want to take it seriously, once a year, which is a nonsense, because that score is going to be influenced how I feel today, not the entire year, right? It's going to be influenced by, maybe you are my boss and we had an argument 2 days ago, last week, you just told me off, or you didn't give me my day off. So now I'm bitter and resentful and I'm going to punish you with this score. So we cannot rely on these ratings and start creating global and company-wide action plans based on my mood today. So this application, what it does, or going to do, hopefully, inshallah, it builds up your profile as an employee and shows you at the end of the year, you can pull this report anytime you want to, right? And it's a good tool for the organization to step in that Szilvia has been unhappy for 2 weeks. What the hell is happening? So I'm your manager. I'm going to go and have a chat, just check in. Maybe it's nothing to do with the work, but, so it's proactive. But at the end of the year, Szilvia, I can check how my journey was throughout the year. And then we take that score. Was she happy? Was she unhappy? Or is this an average? And that's what engagement means. If we really want to measure something, do it on a daily basis, because that's exactly what we are doing with our customers in any business.
And also asking the right questions is absolutely critical, isn't it? Because a lot of the questions out there are very, very generic. And the other key thing that you mentioned there was you're doing it for a year to collect that data. So it goes back to our point earlier about sticking with something to really be able to start to identify the trends and see what's really happening. It's so important to look at it from all avenues. I really like the piece of that where they've got then options to expand on the reason for giving that answer, because that's where you get to know people. And we're living in a world now where we want a personalized approach. You look at any technology that we use, we love it when we go somewhere and then somebody says, oh, we know you like this. Would you like some more? Or we recommend this for you. And it's the perfect fit. As human beings, we love that. Like, we need it. We're a bit creeped out by the technology and how it knows, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think we're moving into a very personalized age. And if organizations don't start to get up to speed with that, I think there's going to be a lot of things left behind, especially when it comes to the ability to thrive in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. And this is the way forward, because that would give you sufficient information, because we don't know any reason behind these KPIs. And I was just writing about it the other day. Like, we have no information why Szilvia is unhappy. Now, I might have a chat with her, but that's, we want to look for patterns. It's always the pattern of behavior that we look for, not one-off behavior, not 2 weeks of behavior. I want to see 6 months of behavior, because that's the person, not 1 week and not 2 weeks. But we don't have any information. Why do I? And this is where employee experience comes into the picture. And it's not HR who is going to solve employee experience and engagement or wellness. I'm sorry, but that's not HR. HR needs to run the machine. And I'm happy with that. As much as I like to come for them, sometimes I understand that they are very busy. And we need this authority in any organization who says, it's the mom and the dad. No, you cannot. These are the rules, etc. We need the discipline part. And if you want to go and address employee experience, it cannot be the same person. It's like grading your own homework, like you just cannot, because every experience I have is embedded in HR policies and procedures and whatever HR. So we need to separate. And companies now moved on. And what they do, which I really, really like, they bring in employee experience. It's a very senior role. It's on the same level as the most senior employee manager, leader in that organization. So most of the time they report directly back to the CEO or the not to HR. But what they do is fantastic, because what they do is literally looking for these answers about human behavior, about their experiences. So I'm not happy with my manager. Okay, that's great. That would tell your employee engagement data will tell you, Szilvia is not happy with her manager. Why? What's happened there, And really drill into it. I'm not happy with my learning and development, my professional growth. Why? What is happening? We don't have this valuable data. I wasn't happy with the recruitment process. Why? So then employee experience is really collecting all that feedback from employees. And it's a very hectic, it's a horror. You need a team of doing that, to be honest, but it's a tedious job. But this is where it starts. This is how you show that I care about you, because companies love saying, we care about you. Okay, prove it. Like invest in somebody who actually comes and shows me that you guys care about me. And so employee experience comes, and then advise and create policies and procedures to put in place to address those. So it's basically the advisor of HR, and HR needs it, whether they like it or not. I know that they like to be in control of the workforce, but they are running the machine, and they have very valuable, and they're very important. So organizations don't shut down, and we can continue, but they are not equipped, and they don't have the time and the capacity and the capability to manage to look at that data. So that employee experience person is really creating employee experience, designing policies and procedures and structures and development or whatever that is, even related to exits. So they take the exit data, and now going back along the employee cycle, that person didn't left after 2 weeks of employment because the onboarding training is just not sufficient. She was thrown into deep water. So now that person takes the information, let's go back. Okay, now I need to address this issue. And then they report directly back and they to the CEO, and they cannot be overridden by HR. Yeah. They are separate.
I think it's very clear, isn't it, that the way forward within an organization is to have somebody full-time that is supporting that role for the business, whether that's somebody outsourced that helps with that, or whether that is somebody that is employed, that the need for that role is becoming more and more necessary, and that's becoming clearer and clearer. And one of the reasons why I think it's also so needed is because previously there's been almost like this one and done mentality. It's like, right, that policy is written, job done, tick. And then it's like, okay, let's forget about that. When we ask companies, Wellness Series, one of the things that we do with our assessment piece, we ask them, when was the last time your policies were reviewed in multiple different areas? And most of the time, and I mean like 99% of the time, they don't even know, let alone when we actually look. It's a very long time ago, and it's something that we need to keep, again, our finger on the pulse with, because it is forever changing, because we have so many different people coming through. If we think about ourselves just for a moment, how many emotions do we feel throughout a day? How many things do we have to contend with on a daily basis, inside work and outside of work? And now if we imagine that we're expecting somebody else to then take on everybody else's stuff, more or less, obviously in a more of a professional situation rather than actually having to live their life, but to even consider and to put yourself in their shoes, that changes all of the time, from moment to moment. So if we're expecting people to just almost do this on the side of their full-time job, it's never going to hit the mark where it needs to hit. What, Szilvia, do you think is the future when it comes to senior leadership making decisions about this constant change that's happening and the rise and the need for better health and well-being? And I know you've just shared that in some context, but is there anything else that's standing out for you?
I think it's and I'm going to be very far-fetched here, to be honest, because what they don't understand is that AI is here to help you with all that. And it's just so beyond that, AI is here to take away a lot of manual work that we are busy, and we all busy, everybody in organizations. And we leaders and managers, they need to change their mindset that your job, look at your job, what can be done by technology, But your job is really to constantly scan your environment and adjust and respond to it. Sometimes anticipate if you are good enough, or sometimes, sometimes we can, sometimes we cannot. And pay attention to your people, because those people will be able to, if you can mobilize them and energize them around that idea that you want to do, they will be the one who's going to execute that, And if they understand this, that their job is not on the line because AI comes in, but it's really to make their life easier, I think this is when it's going to change. And that's going to change, I think, with the new generations, because they will use it. But the new generations also need to learn that just because the job is done, everybody is so occupied by getting the job done that they're not paying attention to anything else in the organization. And this I have seen every organization, literally, like so many different organizations, and it's the same thing. The job done. Okay, the part of your job is your people. Part of your job is to develop your organization. Part of your job is to look around, eliminate what are the policies we no longer serve us. What are the practices that no longer serve us? What are the systems that are absolutely just making our life misery? Get them out. They just clutter, and then we sit and swim in this clutter, being busy keeping our heads above the water. And that's the mentality that they do. They are so busy with nothing that the daily things, that they don't stop for a minute. Okay, leave the daily things. Today we are not going to eat because I'm not going to cook, but we're going to clean up the house, And that's a fair compromise.
It is, right? And like, I get it, it's tough, I understand why this happens. I'm guilty of this as well, for sure. We're all human at the end of the day, but we have to start being more aware of who are we being whilst we are doing, right? And I think that plays a really huge part. And one of my mentors always talks about this idea of being functional or being vital. And I think your point there about technology and leveraging it and using it to our advantage helps us to move out of the functional space 100% of the time and allows us to use our energy, use our personality for the things that really count. Now, don't get me wrong, I know there are roles that are absolutely functional and you need them, right? But at the same time, we can go from being 100% functional, staring at our laptop screen all day, every day, without and ignoring eating lunch, ignoring our colleagues, ignoring going home to our families. We can stay in that space for 100% of the time, or perhaps we can just start to reduce that to like 50% of the time. So you can start to create some semblance of enjoyment in the workplace.
And this is how change happens. The reason organizations are stagnant is one of the reasons is because you're busy doing the daily task and nobody is strategizing, nobody is looking at what do we need to get rid of and bring in, and what are the changes that needed to be done in order to move forward. So basically, we are just treading water. Yeah. Who is there to move us forward? Every organization, and when I work with leaders, teaching them how to build high-performing teams, the same principle applies to high-performing organizations. You have people, a group of people, 10%, that they are the strategic thinkers. They are the idea creators. They are the ones who are very creative and bring, solutions. And all they do is looking at things. Well, how can we do things differently, right? And then you have the 90% who will execute that. But when you don't have that, everybody is just executing. What are we executing constantly? Like, what is it that we do constantly? Who is looking? What's next, how to do things different. When you don't have that, you're not moving anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's one of those things, it's understandable given the number of hours in a week versus where it is you're trying to go to. And I know particularly C-suite are often obviously the people in those roles that are trying to do that. But sometimes there's so many fires to be fought because we're not leveraging things like technology or remembering that it's completely okay to take a step back to be able to take a step forward. It's a really tough trade-off, I think, for leaders to make. So when you're working with leaders and you're taking them into that high performance space, how do you get them to create that transformation, that change in the way that they think and approach those kind of situations?
It's a self-awareness development. It's really, and that's hardest because people push back. They don't really want to see who they are. Nobody does. But it starts with candid conversations. That you are not unique. Everybody is going through the same. I know your problems. We all have the same problems. So first of all, don't feel bad, because that's why we are here. The only thing that you should feel bad about, or you should feel bad about, is if you want to hide it, because that's you're not going to go anywhere. But it's self-awareness development, and when I do the workshops with them, I do two assessment, the strength assessment and the personality. So personality assessment, I work with the big 5, and which is the only one that is accepted by psychology, really, and that is only for senior leaders, because you need to be mature enough to take that information in, because that shows you who you are, And based on that, I start the conversation. And it's always good to use tool to use any kind of assessment, as long as it's psychometrically valid, because that's not my opinion. It's not your boss's opinion. It's not the competency framework that is asking you to be like that. It's you. You gave the answer. If you disagree with it, well, that's you. And when people are presented with these kind of assessment, and even senior leaders, they start talking about themselves. And that's all I want. I don't want them to swallow another leadership book. I'm not interested in that. What I want is, let's get to know you. How do you function? How do you communicate? How do you build relationships? And then together we can start recognizing patterns that are holding you back, and how your personality, how your strengths impact your decisions, that impacts directly your employees, or your behavior, or how you relate to people, how you build a relationship, because everything is locked in the genetic base, how we behave, And when they understand that, it's much easier for them to start the work within themselves rather than anybody else, because senior leaders are not going to take, advice from anyone. God forbid we do that. But, and I don't want that, because who am I? I'm not the source of truth about anybody. But what I want them is to really tell me, what are those challenges, and what is it that you are really, really good at, and what's driving you? So let's implement that, And based on those conversations, they realize most of the time where they are getting stuck, or what their problems are. I had senior leaders telling me, crying sometimes, that their team members or the managers they're managing, they don't listen to. So what do I do with that information? I had a senior leader saying, I don't want to make decisions, and it keeps me up awake all night. So then we need to find out why, and we don't need to send these poor leaders, or anybody for that matter, for the decision making, how to make a decision, training course. That's not the problem. That person had very different and personal reason for not wanting to make that decisions. So a training course is not going to help. So most of the time, these senior leaders need coaching, and helping them figure out themselves before even we can start addressing building a high-performing team, because they don't know, and they don't know themselves. So how do a lot of work is being done on senior leaders before you can actually start addressing any kind of workshop, any kind of team conflict, or stagnation, or whatever the organization is feeling. For example, I had related to engagement, because nobody wants to address these issues. I'm like, what is the data on toxic work environment, and where is it coming from? And then it came from 2 department heads, right? And even this HR said, I don't want to talk to them. How do I talk to them? I'm like, okay, let me talk to them, And then presenting them with information, and sometimes it's not nice, but your job is not nice, but it's to to deliver information and solve the problem. So then you present them with information that is coming from their teams, and it's shocking, and it's it's not a good feeling as a leader to be, how I impact my team. And I know that it's a horrible feeling. And I always tell them, it's horrible, it's not going to be nice, but we are here to sort this out. And I want you to be okay, to feel bad or upset or whatever, how you want to feel. And that's okay. That's a human reaction to a feedback that I received. And I kind of knew that I'm doing that to my team, but I didn't know how to address it.
That's it. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, but if you don't swallow that bitter pill, it will become poison. And that poison does ripple out through obviously teams, and nobody wants to, be on their last day on earth regretting anything. And if they are completely ignorant and unaware of the impact they've had on others, there's a lot more damage that can be done in the long term. It fascinates me, it really does, because every single person that I've spoken to, particularly on this podcast, but from what I've seen over and over and over again, it always stands with the person in the mirror is the one that gets to be able to make the change. And until in each individual leader for sure, but any individual in a workplace looks at themselves, I don't know that we can really have this lovely picture of engagement and happiness and wellness, in these work environments, because, life is made up of collective group of individuals as human beings, like we started this conversation, right? It all comes back to the human rather than the strategy, rather than, the nitty-gritty day-to-day tasks. It always comes back to the individual.
Absolutely. And I think this will be a massive change going forward in the next 10 years, 20, 15 years, I don't know, that we're going to start talking more about these human experiences, because I'm not even a big fan of engagement surveys putting a number to my experience, because it's just not the representative of how I am or how I feel or how I do. But focusing on human experience and being honest about those. And I think the younger generations will bring that kind of mindset into organizations. That it's okay to say that, what, I messed this one up. My life is messy. Life is messy. We have this delusion that, we are so organized, and life is so messy that we don't even know when was the last time I'm supposed to pick up my laundry, like 2 weeks ago. It's still there. It's the small little things that create that mess. And then we want to look perfect. And sometimes this is what is eating people up. And coming back to having those very tough conversations with leaders. I know nobody wants to have it with them. And people don't even want to swallow that hard pill. But this is what happens. And when I explain that to leaders, somehow it clicks, or anybody. You have two choices. You stick to what you always been doing, what is killing you, is poisoning you, whatever, and everybody else around. And then you go from one job to another because you believe that it's the workplace.
Yeah.
Not the workplace. It's you, lovely, at sometimes, And what you're going to do is just you take your bad habits from one place to another and keep blaming everybody else. And that's and I say that to leaders even with their leadership style, when you go from one organization, from one team to another, you need to change your leadership style. You cannot just be, this is who I am, because your leadership style and how you deal with people and what you do is based on the needs and those people who you are leading. Yep. And then the brand has changed, for example, in the hotel industry. So the leadership style must change. You go from one company to another. They require very different things. So you cannot. And we want these people, everybody to be static. No, this is who I am. Yes, we know. We want you to be who you are. But at the same time, without compromising, you need to incorporate somehow who you are and what you do in line with the people around you. Otherwise, it's just a one-way road, and it doesn't work for anybody. Not even in a relationship. It's just two people,
Exactly. It's so funny. It's like another one of my mentors always says, like when it's kind of getting this point across that everything is essentially a mirror, and when you just continue moving around, you move the problem with you. It's like wherever the problem is, if you notice that you're there. It's like every time, right? It's not a coincidence, and like you said, it's messy, but it's like it's a beautiful piece of art when we can bring self-awareness into the workplace and have then a social awareness, so that we can then see how are we influencing, what is my responsibility, like is essentially everything's, I believe, our responsibility all of the time, 100% of the time. Even the like communication, I think I'm 100% responsible for the communication that I'm having and how it's being received. So, so we can always troubleshoot and improve every time, because if we don't have that, we're just leaving it to chance or blame, and then we immediately create separation, which then again breaks trust, breaks everything you're trying to build most of the time within an organization, which is a massive struggle.
And there's rejection. I have met leaders that they are being rejected wherever they went, and by their team, by the other leader colleagues. And it's not a great feeling, when you are being rejected. And at some point, we need to look at, why am I being rejected constantly? Why am I always the outlier in here? Why am I always the one who is excluded from everything, or whatever the situation is? But rejection is a massive issue for leaders, and they are scared of rejection, and they are scared of feedback. And that's why I like to do an exercise with them where we go into, it depends on the workshop or the coaching session, but I'm not even interested in what they say about themselves as leaders. I run a survey with their team members before that, and I receive the answers, and I package it, and I put it in a way that is digestible for the person, because sometimes the truth comes out and is not nice, so we don't need to ruin the person. But so I make it nicer. But I present it that, lovely, this is what your team members are, this is how they feel about being led by you or managed by you. What do you respond to that? And then there are variety of responses, and that's okay. I'm fine with it, because then you can start the journey of, okay, what am I doing that people see me this way?
Yeah.
Right? It's not that, oh, these people, blah, 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 blah. No, what am I doing that I come across that way? Yeah. And it's really, really hard. They want to run away. They can't take it. I had leaders, they stood up and left the meeting. They just come on. They come back later on, and I'm happy with them run away, because at least I know they care about it. So run away, that's okay. That's a good sign for me that you care about what other people are saying. But we need to do this to because otherwise there is no improvement. Without truth, there is no moving forward. Exactly.
And it's tough love, isn't it, at the end of the day? But I think it's interesting, right? Because I wonder for our listeners, if like this could feel like a bit of a stab towards leaders, right? We're putting a lot of onus in this conversation in and around leaders, and perhaps the responsibility of a workforce is only solely on leaders. I'm curious to know, in your opinion, whose shoulders does it fall on? Whose responsibility is it to be able to thrive in the workplace?
I think the collective responsibility. But you remember, if everybody is in charge of something, then nobody is in charge. So it's a difficult, right? So I always say, just like you said, take responsibility for what you need to take responsibility for. So for your own action, for your or success, or your failure. As an individual, let's start with the leaders and the manager. My job is really to create an environment where my people can succeed. And now I need to break it down. How does it look like? So they have opportunity for that. They are not stressed out, the workload, the working hours. So then the leader can literally make 10 points. What does this environment look? How does this look like? Environment look like where my people can thrive? And they can. I did it once with the leader. What is the environment where my people manage very well? Just cruise along. And what is it on the top that they thrive? So what are those extra elements? So you can break it down in that way. And then for the employee as well, I cannot just blame the leaders for everything, or blame my managers or HR or the organization. I always say to employees and for everybody, take charge of your career, take charge of your development, know yourself, know what you bring to the table, know your strengths, know your skills, expertise, your capabilities, and don't let other people to tell you, because then you come back to us, oh, you put me in this position, but I'm not happy. Well, did you want to? No, I didn't really want to, but you offered, and it's more money. So now you are not thriving because now we put you in the wrong position and you were okay with it, for example. So don't let anybody to tell you what you are capable of doing, and don't play that victim mindset that the whole world is against me and my managers are against me. If you know your worth, if you need to make sure that it's put across in a way that you benefit from it, and you will end up in situation in life is messy, you end up in wrong bosses, in wrong environment. Don't suffer there, move on, find a way out, have a strategy. I'm not saying to resign without any backup plan, but have a strategy, but take charge of your own career and everything, because most of the time what I see in organizations, especially with employees, they play this, and I know, I always support everyone and I see who is playing what game, and employees like to play the victim game. Oh, my manager, my leader. I'm like, okay, nobody is perfect. And I know every single fault of theirs. But at the same time, have you tried to have a conversation with your manager? Oh, no. I'm like, but this is what others do, But they are not willing to be uncomfortable to have that conversation. So maybe their life can be better at work. So they're just waiting for everybody to come and rescue them. Everybody take responsibility.
Do you think that employers have a responsibility to help employees who are of that mindset to evolve their skill set in those areas?
Yes, to a certain degree. I think we need to give the opportunity to everyone. Now, we can have conversations with people, that maybe your mind, and this is where the coaching comes into, knowing your people, right? You can't develop them without knowing them. If you know that you have somebody on your team has this victim mindset, you might want to have this conversation, this candid conversation that, look, lovely, you could do much better, but maybe your mindset is holding you back. Maybe it's not that the entire world is against you, and maybe it's not that we discriminate against you. That's not the reason you didn't get that last promotion. Yeah. And I've had this conversation with employees many, many times, because they are very creative when it comes to creating stories why they are not moving forward, and rather than, because that's easier than taking responsibility and make an effort of whatever needs to be done. So having that conversation, definitely. But I think managers or the organization's responsibility is to make sure everybody has equal access and equal opportunity to things. And if they see people, some of them will take, the benefit and the advantage and take the opportunity. And some, if I see that person has the capability, I probably have, as a line manager or leader, the responsibility or the moral responsibility more than to have the chat, and see where it goes.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. It doesn't mean that you have to be the one that coaches them, but at some point, there is a responsibility to be able to reflect back what you're seeing, and that doesn't even need to be in an accusation. It's more of just an observation. This is what I've noticed, and this is a pattern that's been reoccurring. Can you see this within yourself? If you can, here are some options of what we can do. And there can be things within the organizations, or it can be a little nudge as to perhaps some extra work that they need to do outside of work for them personally. And I think sometimes those lines can get really blurred. And I think a lot of managers, usually more junior managers, they really want to try to help. So they almost try to coach people, but they don't have the skill to do it. And then there's just all this resentment that comes, and then everybody just ties themselves in knots, and then it just has a knock-on effect. So I find it really interesting to hear your answer there, and just to reiterate what you said about it being a collective responsibility and everybody being responsible for their own part that they're playing. I think that is the way. I personally agree with that.
And one thing for managers and leaders, because coming back to what you just said, there's a lot of rejection when managers are pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, Your role as a leader, as a manager, is not to, put something into employees that is not there. It's to bring it out.
Yeah.
And when you know that difference between these two approaches, it's very easy. You can just throw things over there. You can test. You can put the person to the task and see if she can, perform. And really, how can I get this? I see something in you, but I'm not even myself sure that you can do it. But I see something. So what can I do to bring that out of you? Maybe I fail. Maybe I'm wrong. And that's it. So sometimes people don't even know what they are capable of doing or what they want to do. So sometimes the way of showing it to them is not telling them you should be this, you should be that. You should just put them to the task and see how they respond to it. And if they enjoyed it, yeah, fantastic. You see, you can do it. And if they hated it, they did it or they couldn't, but they hated it, that's not the one. And that's it,
Exactly. And which brings it back to really being about trial and error, right? And I think giving ourselves permission as organizational leaders to actually try things and make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes, because I think it's very easy, isn't it, to be listening to a podcast or reading certain articles that are out there and reading what you should or shouldn't do, but actually the person that moves the needle forward is the one that's implementing and trying and doing something. So take away one little nugget from this conversation and just try something and just see if you get a different result. If that works, fantastic, do more of the same, right? Or if it doesn't, go down another pathway, but do something. Has to be the way we move out of this point of stagnation.
Yes, that's the only way, trying. And this was the first that I told you that in organizational psychology, that's what we do. We try, we study, we have our reasons why we would implement something, but we are ready for anything that is going to prove us wrong. And sometimes it's a big slap in the face, because human beings, they like so unpredictable. And I give you an example very, very quickly. So I wrote a book about the corporate kindergarten and the infantilization of adults, right? And in the hotel industry, we are very bad at that, or good at that. So one of them is feeding people. We love providing breakfast, lunch, dinner, midnight snack. We constantly feed people. And we have constantly in employee engagement surveys, the food is horrible. You never get good feedback about the food. So I'm like, why are we even having this in the survey, And I said many times what the employees said, and I was relying on employee feedback, right? When I said that or made that claim, I'm like, give them money and let them eat whatever they want to eat. I'm like, these are grown-up people, they can cook for themselves, leave them alone. I had a colleague, a HR director in one of our hotels. She implemented it. We actually implemented it in 4 hotels, but I know the outcome only from her hotel. Guess what happened, which I would have never predicted, and she's been here in this country as well, so she should have as well, maybe say red flags, but none of us, okay? 1 month later, she notices the housekeeping employees getting sick, constantly sick. So she goes, okay, what is going on in here? Something is off. Guess what happened? They saved the money, they skipped meals, they didn't eat, they lost weight, their health deteriorated because they did not get fed.
Wow.
So that's why I always say, implement, try, but be ready to step in immediately, because they will surprise you with something that you could have never anticipated. I mean, maybe I should have taught her. I don't know, but I learned that not so hastily.
Human behavior, as predictable as it can be, it's also very unpredictable, which is another pressure that leaders have to deal with. But it's something that is human. Just to reiterate what we've said, and that clearly is the through line for this conversation, is that everyone's human. We can do our best to meet everyone where they are. It's never going to be perfect, but we need to be directionally correct. right? And we need to be moving forwards. So Szilvia, I could speak to you all day long, for sure, in and around all of these topics. But my last question for you is a little bit kind of off pieces to what we've been speaking about. But as you know, this podcast is all about, becoming a force for good and encouraging organizations to also look beyond themselves and their organization to see the impact that they can have. And so for every listen to this podcast episode, a donation is going to be made to one of the 2030 global goals. And you've chosen to support the Zero Hunger goal. So I'm curious to know, and your previous answer and example that you just gave me might have something to do with this, but why is this so important for you, this goal?
So I am all about intellectual capabilities, and I studied IQ and personality in depth. And I know that IQ and one of the personality traits, but IQ is the number one predictor of success in life. And what we need for that is nutrition. We know the nutritional impact on IQ development in children. Yeah. And that's the most important thing. And when children don't get enough nutrition, they are malnourished. It has an impact on their entire life, because if IQ cannot develop, that will have a negative impact for the rest of their lives. So this is very, very important. If you can do one thing for children, is to feed them really, really well.
I love that. What a great answer. That's probably one of the most insightful answers that I've had since recording these episodes. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for all of the insights today, Szilvia. I think there's so many things that our listeners can take away. I've learned throughout this conversation. I'm sure they have too. And I would really encourage anybody to come and obviously follow you, particularly on LinkedIn, but we'll have all of the links as to where our listeners can find you in the show notes as well. Is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation as we wrap up today?
Well, not really. It's just pay attention to the people around you, and that's the most important. And we are not doing enough of that. Pay attention. Don't come with your pre-designed solutions, because whatever you come up with is not going to be suitable to others. So ask a lot of questions.
100%. I love that so much. Brilliant. Szilvia, thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our listeners also for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for having me.
Today's episode was hosted by myself, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills, the co-founder of The Wellness Theory. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe and share with someone who may benefit, and be part of our mission to help people realise when they're healthy and well, they can be a force for good in the world. I just wanted to share some more about our partner, B1G1. B1G1 is a global movement that enables businesses to incorporate effective impact creation into their everyday activities in a simple and powerful way. Through B1G1, businesses can choose from a wide range of verified projects around the world and integrate these impacts into their business operations. The core concept of B1G1 is that every business transaction or interaction can be directly linked to making a positive impact in our world, whether it's providing access to clean water, supporting education, planting trees, or addressing social issues. B1G1 enables businesses of all types to make a real difference. To find out more about them, visit their website at b1g1.com. Until next time, be well, mean well, and make a difference that lasts. See you in the next episode.